make a start. I'll do.
Okay, here they come.
Welcome, everyone. We'll wait a minute or two for people to drop into the call. So there's still time to finish that last email or get a cup of something. We'll be starting promptly in a minute. Excellent. So, welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for dialing in. We have to say we're delighted that so many of you were able to join this lunchtime session today. And I think really that's a testimony to how significant this moment is for community energy. It's probably fair to say, I guess, that the local power plan shows that the ambition of government and the ambitions of the community energy sector have never been as aligned as they are today. My name is Johannes Möller. I am the Energy Learning Network lead, and I'm pleased to be co-hosting the event today, which is jointly organized by the Energy Learning Network partners with input from GB Energy. For those who do not know the Energy Learning Network, we are a collaboration between Climate Solutions, Charity Ashton, the Centre of Sustainable Energy, and leading community energy bodies in every UK nation. So that's Community Energy England, Community Energy Scotland, Community Energy Wales, and then Northern Ireland's Action Renewables. So essentially, we are working together to help more groups launch and grow community energy schemes through events, resources, support programs such as mentoring. And we're also working on creating a better and enabling environment for community energy and support collaboration across the sector. And I'd say that that piece around supporting collaboration seems to be particularly important right now, as it's so fundamental in enabling us to meet the ambitions of the local power plan and those of the sector. And that's what we're here to hear more about today. So, brief overview of the event today. We have a panel that speaks to the local power plan and what it means for community energy. We're really pleased to have Fraser Stewart here, the head of local power strategy at Great British Energy, and Will Walker, UK policy lead from Ashton, and Zoe Holliday, the chief executive from Community Energy Scotland, who will be sharing their responses to the local power plan. And then we will be enabling an open discussion within each nation, which will be hosted in breakout rooms for England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And we've got the ELN team here with John Taylor from Community Energy England, Dara Kinagan from Community Energy Scotland, Lydia Godden from Wales, and Jack Stewart from Northern Ireland. At the end, we will also have 10 to 15 minutes for questions, and I appreciate we won't have time on the call for all of the questions, but we are gathering all comments and questions that we in our feedback form as well that we can then share with GB Energy. As always, keep yourself muted during the call, during the presentations. Join in with the discussions as much as you can. Add comments and questions to the chat as we go along. And then please do fill in our feedback form that we'll be sharing at the end. I think without further ado, let's get started with the panel. Welcome, first of all, to Fraser from Great British Energy with an introduction of the local power plan. So over to you, Fraser.
Thanks, Johannes. It's nice to see everyone. So yes, I'm Fraser. I'm the head of local power strategy at GB Energy. Some of you I believe a good few of you, in fact, on the call, we've met over the years. I was a former director at Glasgow Community Energy. Prior to my current role, I led up the Just Transition and Communities work at Regen, non-profit consultant, lots of community energy work in there, including in the Net Zero Living programme. So nice to see everyone. Thanks very much for coming along. As you can imagine, it's a very, very busy time just now as we ramp up from Local Power Plan being published into Local Power Plan delivery. In short, the Local Power Plan, it seemed to land really well. The biggest commitment that we've seen financially, at least to community energy in this country. My job, effectively, is that tricky second album. It's the delivery of this stuff on the ground and in practice. If we could go to the next slide, please, Joanna. So I would hope you've seen the Local Power Plan. You've managed to pour through it. The high-level ambition we set out is outlined on the slide here just now. So we have four main things that we were trying to achieve. First of all, around powering communities to support over 1,000 local and community energy projects and boosting shared ownership. I want to emphasise that 1,000 local and community energy projects, we very much see that as the baseline. We're shooting for beyond that as far as possible. That's our MVP in this context. Our plan is to also catalyse the development of scalable, self-sustaining business models for community energy. So as far as possible, making it so that the models that we know are currently marginal or challenging can become more robust and can scale up across the country into new and different communities. We want to act as a bit of a sector leader and a market maker, a strategic investor. So we want to bring through new and innovative models of local and community energy, but also to enable the organisations that are already doing immense work on the ground to drive that even further forward. And we want to, as a point of principle, help more communities get this stuff and feel the benefits of it, because we think that's important. These commitments set out in the Local Power Plan, they're quite nice and they're quite fluffy and high level. Behind all of this, the mechanics that sit underneath it, we are working away very, very diligently within GB Energy just now. So I'm going to share with you, I can't put it on a slide because working in government, apparently we have to go through comms teams and stuff. So I'm going to share with you some stuff that you didn't hear from me in terms of what our strategic principles and approach are shaping out to be as we look to deliver the Local Power Plan. So moving from, I guess, this higher level version on the screen here, we are working to 4 strategic objectives within GB Energy Local currently, and we're engaging with various stakeholders in the sector to sense check and refine these. But those objectives are scale and pace, enabling 1,000 plus projects by 2030. The main approach to that is really around standardization. So making sure that the models that we know work within community energy are very easy to lift and lay, and for other organizations to take them forward. Through aggregation, so identifying opportunities to invest in several projects at once, or invest or partner with organizations that can help deliver multiple projects at once. And then replicability. The second core strategic objective that we had, and this, in my mind, to be honest, is number one, but I'm very biased, is around the just transition. So making sure not just that vaguely all communities can own and benefit from local and community energy. That is the overriding plan. But making sure that those underserved currently, those less affluent, more marginalised working class communities can access this stuff, and that we can reach out to them and build those partnerships to make that happen. So to deliver that, we're exploring how we target capacity and capability support into those types of communities. We're working to develop methods and processes for identifying capacity at a national scale so we can help better target our support and our outreach and engagement efforts. We are trying to understand the level of conditionality we can put around our investments to make sure that we can unlock and prioritise those high just transition, high exemplary social value style projects. And working in partnership with lots of different organisations, not just those ones in the energy space, but right across the spectrum, from local authorities and public sector naturally, but through charities, through sports, through culture as well. And there will be people on the call and on the panel that we're very much in discussion with about, and people as part of this cohort who do this stuff regularly. So we're keen to hear from you. The third strategic objective we're working to is around innovation. So that's enabling, de-risking, bringing these novel and new models through to market, notwithstanding that we know the great established work that already has happened in the sector, but where we can bring through new models and help to make those viable and help to make those replicable for other communities. We will seek to do so. And then the final point is on ownership, a strategic objective, maybe more a principle, if I'm honest. which is essentially a presumption of community ownership wherever we see it feasible in the work that we're doing. It would be quite straightforward. And I say that with a pinch of salt because it wouldn't be straightforward. But the easiest way to do 1,000 projects is to identify a bunch of public sector and local authority roofs and grant fund, chuck a bunch of solar on top of them. We know that community ownership in particular is a force multiplier of social value, of economic value, of community cohesion, and everything that can come from that. So we are prioritising community ownership where feasible. We're prioritising local public ownership where feasible as well, and that includes, helping bring down bills around frontline services. But the ideal spot is in partnership amongst those organisations, and we're interested in community wealth building too. Now, in the local power plan, there is reference to building community wealth. I think community wealth building is a very specific framework. It's a very specific approach to developing democratic ownership of assets and value retention at the local level. We're taking that seriously from our position for how we can enable that with local power at the core of those processes. So you didn't hear any of that from me. You might hear it publicly in the future. Can we get the next slide, please, Johannes? Great. So the local power plan itself, in terms of what was included there was a clear steer across, I guess, three main pillars here, which are set out at the bottom of this slide. So the first being that direct funding to overcome barriers of access to finance and funding certainty. So this includes, I guess, a blend of the early stage grant support, which we're familiar with in this sector already, making sure that's still accessible, that we can do the feasibility, the pipeline development, etc. But we're also digging now into, I guess, what the more investment side or the commercial side of GBE Local's offer is likely to be. So we're looking to have effectively a toolkit or a suite of different products that will help different types of projects at different stages in their life cycle. And as I say, we're working away hard in the background in that. Within the local power plan, we commit to publishing it's called a capital toolkit. I think that's a horrendous word to describe what it is that we're trying to do. But we've pledged to publish that in the summer. We're still working on that timeline, but it's a capital toolkit is a misnomer. I think you'll hear more about that in due course. The second pillar is then a team of experts and I think more a network of partners working in tandem to help communities plan and build their project, to get out and build capacity in areas that are typically underserved, but also to support any community level organisation to get this stuff done. We know there's a very experienced and a massively ambitious existing ecosystem of such partners, again, many of whom are on the call. And so we're currently exploring exactly what that looks like and building out the necessary relationships and processes to maximise this in practice. Because in terms of 1,000 projects, that is a hell of a lot of projects, and we want to make sure that we're boots on the ground, getting that out to as many different types of places as possible. The final point then is that long-term plan around getting more investment into the sector. This is effectively GBE Local planning to act as a catalyst for wider, whether that's social impact investment coming in en masse. We've heard for years that there's loads of blended finance sloshing around waiting for somewhere to go. So GBE Local is currently exploring how we can support that transition to bring in more of that, let's say, ethical finance into the space. Through things like aggregating projects together to the scale that investors would typically look at. All of this under discussion, but the main focus of the local power plan. Could we get the next slide, please? So a little bit more detail in terms of specifically what have we committed to fund and what do we still have sort of on the slate that we're developing ahead of the summer. The first is that emergence and development grant side of things, where the Community Energy Fund currently sits and much of CARES and Welsh Government Energy Service. That is the first thing that is committed to, and we're working on exactly what the mechanics of that for the next iteration for 26-27 looks like, with a view to launching as ready. So we're not, I guess, we're committed to this sort of summer launch of the capital toolkit, again, wrong words. But we're not hanging about. We're not going to make everyone wait for any kind of funding or any kind of support until the summer. As stuff is ready, we will make sure that it gets out into the world. So we have the community fund, the sort of new iteration of that. We then have a new fund committed to here, which is the partnership fund, helping local authorities and community energy organisations work together, whether that's on capacity building, whether that's on using local area energy plans to identify potential sites for community ownership, that sort of thing, we anticipate being the core of this fund. It will be on a grant funding basis, but the size, the scale, and the launch plan still TBD, but lots of progress being made. We then had two loans set out where we know projects often fall over in the development life cycle. The first being the construction loan, which is for those more marginal projects that need support to get over the line on a final investment decision. And then a shared ownership loan, because we know that so much of what is needed strategically for Clean Power 2030 is already in the pipeline, and there are so many communities across the country who are interested in taking a stake in some of those commercial developments, but raising that sort of awkward, I guess, commercially awkward level of finance that's above what's available typically in the social sector, but beneath where institutional or commercial investors might come in. We're trying to target at addressing that gap as far as possible. Again, all subject to final detailed design, and you'll hear more about that in the coming months. Final point is then, I guess, the capital toolkit point, or the local investment funding point, which we have covered off already. Behind all of this, we've also mentioned a strong partner network, particularly around capacity and capability, but we're also really, really interested in partners regionally, I guess, as part of this community wealth building approach, so that if you come to GBE Local and you are looking for support for finance, whatever it is, we also have partners working locally who can come and help you with your installation, with your feasibility, and all that good stuff. Again, all in partnership with everyone in the wider sector, and all under detailed design. Next slide, please, Johannes. So that is just about it for me. In terms of next steps, in terms of what you should expect from us, we will have, alongside this launch, we're looking to put out a more detailed local energy strategy. So our 4 strategic objectives that we ran through, and all the products and services that we're ready to launch in the summer, we're looking to wrap up and get out into the world. There will be, with people on this call and plenty others beside, apologies if you're sitting in my inbox just now, I will get back to you. But with most people on this call, there will be some engagement to make sure that this shapes out in a way that reflects the need of the sector. We are, in the nearest term, finalising our sort of foundational pillar, that capacity and capability support, the grant funding, etc., because we know that there's a desperate need for it right now. There's a pipeline out there that needs some help, so we're working to get that finalised as soon as possible. Can't confirm a date just yet, I'm afraid. Then have the summer launch of the more sort of commercially style product portfolio alongside that strategy, and then an ongoing process of engagement. The last thing I will ask is, please be patient if you are in the inbox, if you are trying to get in touch. We are a small and nimble team, growing every day, but engagement with the sector and making sure that this does what you need it to ultimately is priority number 1. So please do get in touch. If you do have a project, you'll have seen in the local power plan there was an expression of interest form as well. Please do chuck your projects into there so that we can get them into the pipeline as soon as possible. Thank you very much, everyone. That's all from me. Sorry I took so long.
Thank you very much, Fraser, for starting us off. I'm sure that there are already questions on everyone's minds. Feel free to use the chat already to put them down, make them known. But for now, we're going to go over to Will Walker, policy lead based at Ashton, to share his response to the local power plan.
Thanks, Johannes, and good afternoon, everyone. Really great to be here with you all. And Fraser's actually gone and covered off a lot of the points I was going to make anyway. So thanks, Fraser. That made my job a little bit easier. But I'm going to start with a bit of history, really, and just to say that this is a landmark moment for community energy. You can see on the slide here, I think 230 odd years of community energy history in the UK. Doesn't cover all bases, but we start on the left there with the Anti-Mill Society in Hull, which is one of Britain's first, if not the earliest, energy co-op, as far as I'm aware, in the country, where workers bunched together, raised capital from their own pockets to build a cooperative mill in response to the bread riots and closure and other things going on at the time to feed the poorer people in the community, and right through to on the right-hand side of the screen to some more modern day, excellent examples of modern day examples of community energy. So you've got Westmill Solar and Wind there, and of course Ambition Lawrence Weston, which is hosting the largest, I think it's still the largest onshore wind turbine in the country, 100% community owned, and delivering £100,000 a year into the community in profits. In the middle on the slide there, you've got the front page of The Independent on the launch of the UK's first community energy strategy back in 2014, of which I had a small part to play when I was in government in the civil service. And the main thing that was announced as part of that strategy was a £10 million community energy fund, alongside some other supportive policies, including a community electricity right, so powers around a community electricity right. And it's nice to see that those things have been dusted off in the local power plan as well. Those powers are back on the table. So that brings us right up to where we are now, 2026, with the local power plan, which is the largest public investment in community energy in UK's history. And as Fraser has said, the vision at the heart of it is that by 2030, every community in the UK will have the opportunity to own a local energy project. So that is a huge ambition. And in the Secretary of State's words at the launch of the local power plan the other week, so I'm quoting directly here, he said, "This is not just a Labour policy, but a glimpse of a different economy where ownership matters, a transformative tool to build the wealth of local areas." And that is a genuinely new register for energy policy in this country. And I think it's fair to say it's been the product of years, indeed decades of kind of patient, determined work. Many of the organizations on this webinar right now and the people involved in this webinar, and indeed others outside of this, who kept making the case for community energy through the dark years after the feed-in tariff withdrawal, through the many kind of planning barriers, the onshore wind moratorium, etc., and through a great many consultations. So this, everyone should take great heart in that, and to be applauded for the work that you have done to push this over the years. And you can see a picture on the right-hand side of the Up the Energy campaign, which is the latest expression of that work to raise awareness around community energy and push for the policy change. But it is very much kind of standing on the shoulders of others that have pushed this for a long time. And I think crucially, it obviously required policymakers, officials in government who listened, right? So a big thank you to Fraser and the GB Energy team and all of the DESNZ officials really that worked on this, and a lot of hard work I know went into getting it out there into the world. And with it, I think we really are on a new footing here, where community energy is no longer a niche interest. It is a GB Energy priority and national infrastructure policy now. And that changes the terms of community, and it changes what is possible. Next slide, please, Yanis. So on to the funding of finance. So Fraser's already said a lot of this, but obviously the plan commits up to £1 billion in blended finance through the spending review period. So that's up to 2029. It's not quite the 3.3 billion that was talked about pre-election, but still a substantive and potentially transformative commitment. Fraser's already talked about the package of support, and it's great to hear that the further details on that will be coming out soon. That local power plan makes reference to this package of funding support to be joined up with the National Wealth Fund. I think it also needs to be joined up with the Office for the Impact Economy in Government and others to grow, really crucially, to grow the overall pie of investment that goes into community energy beyond that 1 billion. It's a bit quiet, the local power plan, on revenue streams. Obviously, we need fair prices for community generated power. That's really crucial to sort of bankable, investable business cases. I think Zoe's going to touch a bit more on that in a bit. The plan, there's no mention of the 8 gigawatt target in the published plan. As Fraser has said, it is now the main target there is to support over 1,000 local and community energy projects by 2030. So that's a big target in and of itself. And I really welcome the recognition that the local power plan must serve underserved areas and new entrants into this market. It's definitely something that we were looking for in this, and it's great to get that commitment in there. It's also great, as Fraser's touched on, to see that local authority partnerships with community organisations and shared ownership are right up there in terms of prioritisation for funding and finance. I think it's really, really positive. However, retrofit, energy advice, heat networks appear to be excluded from the local power plan scope at this point, which is a bit of a gap. I think what we still need here, and Fraser has touched on several of these points already, but there's a need for some clarity, for some definitions around what we mean by underserved areas. I think we need further clarity on what is a measurable community benefit. What's the definition of a measurable kind of community benefit? Indeed, also the framework around what local authority and community partnerships will be funded and what those could look like. We know from past interventions in this space, I'm thinking particularly of the split grid connection that came off the back of that original community energy strategy back in 2014, that poorly defined kind of eligibility criteria can lead to quite suboptimal outcomes, and indeed can even be gamed for private gain. So I think it's really important that DESNZ and GB Energy get to work, and it sounds like they are already, around developing those definitions with the sector quite quickly. I think we also need to see these targets, local power plan targets, embedded in GB Energy's annual reporting so we can all collectively hold them to account. And just another nod to the Warm Homes Plan. I mean, there's a big signal in the Warm Homes Plan about a shift to area-based delivery. So we really want to see community energy playing its full role and having a part to play in that picture. I note that the Great British Energy Act does allow for supporting energy efficiency and heat networks in its Articles of Association. So that door is still open. I remain ever hopeful that government can join those two policy priorities up. And then just a flag at the bottom there, as Fraser's already said, that expression of interest process is live right now. You can click on that link. I'd do it in the next week or 2 weeks. I think we want GB Energy to be absolutely overwhelmed with responses from the sector around this. I think that billion of funding, it goes without saying that there are other things going on across the country in government. If there's not a big response from the sector around the pipeline, around what's possible here, it is possible that presumably that funding may get additional pressures on it over the course of the rest of the Parliament. So please do get in touch with GB Energy and express your interest. Next slide, please. And this is the final one for me before I hand over to Zoe. So just on the capacity and capability front. So again, Fraser's already talked about the in-house advisory service of specialists and a community in a box toolkit. I think crucially, the local power plan says GB Energy will invest in people as well as projects. I think that framing really matters, and we should hold them to it. The plan explicitly references CARES in Scotland and the Welsh Government Energy Service as models to build alongside. And it also speaks to ensuring every community can access the support it needs, which is a really strong aspiration. I think the key question here is how will that national advisory service build on and connect with all the regional and local support that is out there? Community Energy Go, Community Energy Launchpad, the Energy Learning Network, of course, rather than duplicating or displacing them. And I think particularly it's great to hear Fraser talking about the just transition, that we know from evidence that obviously low-income communities or those with kind of little pre-existing sector activity need more support than a portal or a toolkit. They need trusted, place-based, one-to-one support, particularly in the early stages to get going. But it sounds very much like that is being thought through in GB Energy and the government. So that's great to hear. And I guess I just close by saying, yeah, I think that capital toolkit, however that's named, is the next kind of key moment. Obviously, Fraser's outlined a couple of steps that are happening before that, which is great to see. But do please engage in that co-design. So as well as registering your project ideas, push for some of these areas that we do need further detail on, whether it's capacity support for new and under-resourced organisations, like regional support, alongside more clarity on these targets, these definitions, the eligibility. And I think Zoe's going to talk about this, but crucially, the community CFD or equivalent floor price, grants and loans funding, are not going to be enough to catalyze a self-sustaining sector this plan aspires to build, which is fantastic. But we need to keep making the case around that price support, that floor price or equivalent, loudly and collectively as a sector. And I just end by saying that we should really welcome the vision and ambition of this plan. The political commitment is real, and we've got an excellent group of officials working on it. We now need the funding product details, the regional support structure, and some of the wider enabling policies that Zoe is going to touch on to move forward quickly. And crucially, it's great to hear that scale is up there, Fraser, as scale and pace. Because we need obviously the communities to start seeing and feeling the benefits rapidly. And ultimately, if we don't make this as politically durable as possible, then it's under risk when at the next election, right? And that means getting on and delivering it now. And the sector collectively will hold the government to account around this constructively, loudly, and together. Thank you. Over to you, Zoe.
Great, thank you. You can just jump straight to the next slide. I'm Zoe. Yeah, that's all that slide tells you. So I'll just cover the kind of the next two sections in the and again, obviously, Fraser's gone over some of this already. The next section in the local power plan is about creating a long-term plan to unlock investment for community energy. This section in particular is pretty high level and kind of is still essentially kind of the starting point to then create the detail. But it essentially outlines kind of two real areas of work for GB Energy. One is about exploring different routes for communities to sell power, mostly highlighted in that kind of diagram there, but kind of through things like power purchase agreements and direct selling to the market, but also through kind of smart local energy systems. One thing that's lacking here is the mention of the smart export guarantee, which currently is, multiple communities are having issues with in terms of the fact that it's just not high enough. So kind of being a bit kind of firmer on what that looks like and what the obligations are on suppliers to pay for electricity that's exported. And then also I'll come to the floor price again so that we don't kind of speak to it too much, but that again is not mentioned here. The second commitment is to develop a local energy platform. And again, there's very little detail on what exactly that platform is or what it will contain or look like. So again, I guess that's kind of a bit of a wait and see, but obviously, hopefully also an opportunity for us to feed in of what that platform might be helpful to be for the sector. And I guess the real questions within this section, which is all about creating these viable, bankable and repeatable business models, is what do those actually look like? And what templates, products and mechanisms as a sector do we need to unlock those models? So again, I know that kind of work is being undertaken right now to look at those, but I think the more that those reflect the realities of our sector, the better. So again, making sure that we're feeding us whenever we're given the opportunity to do so. If we move on to the last section, which I've actually got 3 slides on. So essentially this last section about policy and regulatory changes is essentially the DESNZ, the Department of Energy, Security and Net Zero section. So the first 3 sections are really all about what GB Energy is going to do. And then this last section is all about what the UK government is committing to do essentially in order to unlock the 3 previous sections. So here we've got that firstly, around building an evidence base on smart local energy systems and consulting the sector on implementation options for these. Again, there's a call for sort of specific evidence around smart local energy systems, so do put that information in there. I would also say, as well as filling in the various surveys and forms and contact details that have been provided, I would really urge everyone on the call to ensure that you fill out our State of the Sector survey this year that we do in partnership across the UK. That is the most comprehensive evidence base we have for what's going on in the community energy sector and the most important baseline that we have in order to be able to then go to engage on your behalf in terms of policy and advocacy. So I think this year more than ever that that survey is going to be really important to get that really comprehensive picture for us. So when you're filling in your survey for GB Energy, please keep all that data to hand and be ready. We'll be launching the survey in a couple of weeks, and please kind of also submit it to us so that we can make sure we've got as comprehensive a picture as possible. Other than these kind of various calls to kind of fill out forms, there's no real, although, and it's good to hear from Fraser, there is a real commitment internally in terms of within the actual power plan. There's not a real kind of commitment to or details on what the public participation strategy will be. It kind of feels a bit more ad hoc, so it would be good to see that that's kind of really formalized and make sure that that is going to be kind of the case, to make sure that we are getting what is really the priorities of the sector coming in. Next point is around supporting fair access. Oh no, sorry, keep on the same slide. I'm only on the first slide. The next point is around supporting fair access to energy markets. So firstly, by working with Ofgem, NESO and others, that's the National Energy System Operator, sorry, to make it easier to establish local energy markets and share energy locally through code modifications. I won't go into what those mean now, but essentially that's what unlocks the ability to do that. Also unlocking opportunities for community energy to be able to sell directly to public buildings, for example, where you've got solar owned by community energy on the rooftop of a public building. And then also collating evidence on how communities are currently disadvantaged by current market arrangements. This last point feels a little bit frustrating, because those of you who've been in the community energy sector for a long time know how often we've provided evidence, information, we've responded to barriers, consultations, and so on. And it feels a bit frustrating that the commitment here is only on collating evidence and not on the actual outcome, which we would have liked to see actually committed to in this paper, which is about that price support, which it says that they'll look at after, say, a year of collating evidence. So we would have really liked to see in this a concrete commitment to introducing some kind of floor price or community contract for difference to actually enable communities to build out business plans with a secure financial projection of the income going forward. And then, Will touched on this as well, but there is a commitment to develop a definition of community energy group. We would have liked to see that as an enterprise or organisation, because I think group kind of makes it sound a bit more unofficial. But certainly it's really important to get that definition in place in order to be able to set out eligibility criteria for all the support that's been mentioned in the previous sections. Next slide, please. There's a section on grid connections, and these are all very welcome, including looking at tailored support for community energy from the relevant organisations, looking at whole system optimisation models within the regional energy strategic plans, which are under development currently. Again, I won't go into detail. I think grid would be a whole other section. And then from a Scottish perspective, we were really pleased to see that there's a commitment to address the additional barriers presented by the lower transmission impact assessment thresholds in Scotland. This is essentially, it's much lower in Scotland. It's essentially a process that you have to go through to look at assessment. Even if you're connecting to the distribution network, you still have to undertake this assessment. And currently in Scotland, you have to do that from 200 kilowatts or 50 kilowatts on the islands, compared to 5 megawatts in England. And there's a whole host of other implications of that, but it's really good to see that commitment here. What is missing in this section is we would have really liked to see at least a commitment to look into the possibility of designating community energy projects as needed post the grid connection reform. In order to get a grid connection, your project needs to be both ready and needed. And if community energy was included in this designation criteria as needed, that could make it a lot easier for community projects to connect and to compete on a level playing field against commercial projects. So it's disappointing not to see that included, and we'll continue to advocate for the need for that. And then next slide. And then just to run through these last points, there is a commitment to providing detailed proposals on mandating shared ownership, which is following a consultation that was done last year. So this will be a secondary consultation with an actual proposal of how that might work and consulting on that, and that is committed to happen within 2026. again, it's great to see that commitment, but what we would have liked to see alongside that is incentives for developers, because as it was proposed last year, and as we're kind of currently expecting, it would be looking at making the offers of shared ownership mandatory. But if in order to turn those offers into real agreements between communities and developers, the developers need incentives to actually seal the deal. So we would like to see something like investigations of say an uplift on the contract for difference payments that developers receive, in order that they're actually motivated to actually secure the actual deal. And then a few other points. One is about doing a call for evidence to assess the role of community batteries. That's quite loosely defined, including batteries connected to community energy projects directly, batteries connected to the grid, and also batteries that are sort of connected to multiple homes. I believe that's due again this year. I don't think it's actually committed to, but we have heard from the teams about them developing that right now. Developing scalable investment models for whole place-based net zero solutions, working with the devolved governments. Again, there's not much more detail on that. That's pretty much all that it commits to doing within the local power plan. But again, welcome and very much linking in and relating to the work committed to by GB in the previous sections. And then finally, obviously planning is devolved, but there's a commitment to improve the national planning policy framework in England, which is the only part they have actual power over, to be clearer and more rules-based, and to support planners in actually applying those new rules. And hopefully that might have then a sort of trickle effect in terms of being replicated in Scotland if it's and the other devolved nations if it's successful. So I think that's kind of pretty much our first impressions of the local power plan. And I'll pass back to Johannes to explain what's happening next.
Thank you very much again, Fraser, Will, and Zoe, for outlining your various perspectives. I thought that was very rich view on the local power plan. We've now got an opportunity to discuss this in smaller breakout rooms, split by nation. The group in England will stay in the room. So if you are wanting to join the discussion focused on England, then stay in the room. Do not choose a breakout room. Scotland is actually not Liz, who can't join us today, but it will be Zoe and Dara who will be hosting that breakout room. And then we've got Lydia Godden in hosting in Wales, the Welsh breakout room, and then Jack Stewart on Northern Ireland. We'll come back afterwards and we'll have about 10 minutes in to get one question or theme from each of the breakout rooms fed back, and then Fraser, Will, and Zoe, you can respond to those at the same time. If there's a bit more time, we can pick up any more questions from the chat. So yeah, I'm opening all rooms now. You can choose your own room. As I said, they should be visible now. Here in this main room, I'll be handing over to John to host the discussion, and we all have 20 minutes in this room before we come back.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Johannes. Do you know if I'm able to share my screen on my side?
You should be able to. Yeah, I'll stop the share here.
Sorry to interrupt, Johannes. I'm still in the England room.
Me too. I haven't had anything to click on.
Same here.
Yeah.
So people are finding their way in the room, but I can assign you. I'll assign you manually. Please, if you've got any problems with joining a room, if you put it in the chat, I'll find your name and try to assign you manually.
I think if the breakout rooms options opened, it's right down the bottom. I've just realised, so I'll join now, but I was scrolling for a little while.
Yeah.
Thanks all. Bye.
All right. Yeah, I've found it as well.
Can I join the breakout room as well?
Yeah, please do. Absolutely.
Yep, feel free to roam around.
Excellent.
Actually, I haven't found it.
Tom, I'll assign you. No problem.
Yeah, Scotland, please.
Right. Okay. Yeah, well,
Scotland here too, please. I can't find which tab I'm supposed to press.
Colin, if you tell me which you want to join.
Scotland.
okay. Right, we'll try and just kick some discussion off about the England specific aspects of the local power plan. So, hi everybody, I'm John Taylor, the head of capacity building at Community Energy England, and I'm the lead on the Energy Learning Network for us. So we're the national voice of community energy for England, with a membership body that represents you. And yeah, my colleagues in the policy and advocacy team, Duncan and Josh and our CEO Emma, have been working on the local power plan behind the scenes for the past 2 years. So yeah, great efforts to kind of see it out in the wild now. So exciting time. Yeah, 330 plus members already active in our membership network, as well as supportive local authorities, commercial developers, and all the electricity DNOs as well. Yeah, we've got some great resources on our website, including a national map which just shows the scale of activity. But really, yeah, I agree with a lot of the speakers today. Everything we've been doing to date is practice for this moment, really. So the local power plan, we have it now. In terms of the vision and the ambition, I won't go over what's already been said, but for me, it feels pretty historic as well in terms of, for me, it's the biggest public call to action since World War II. I kind of use the analogy that yeah, people want to be part of the solution in communities up and down the land, and they don't want to just sit back and see government and big companies delivering this for us. They want to contribute, just like we did with the war effort. Some of our proudest moments were things like the Women's Land Army and the Home Guard, and yeah, that flotilla of small ships rescuing people from Dunkirk. So I think it's building on that national spirit of everybody stepping up and contributing. And whether it's finance, there'll be a parallel with community bonds and climate bonds and community energy shares, as well as people getting active and changing the landscape. Just a quick reminder of what we mean by community energy. So it is that social enterprise approach through mutuals and cooperative business models to build and own renewable energy projects, linking in local retail savers and investors, developing renewables, contributing to that clean power mission that's democratic, not-for-profit and place-based. So electrification and democracy for me equals community energy. The local power plan breaks down into 4 categories. The direct funding, we'll talk about that in a moment, specifically about the GB Energy Community Fund. That's probably the main body of funding support for the England-based community energy groups. Historically, that's been called the Rural Community Energy Fund, the Urban Community Energy Fund, then the Community Energy Fund. But it's pretty much the same principle of more feasibility funding and development loans to help with that early stage bottleneck of how do you get your resources around turning an idea of a project into kind of something that has planning permission and an investable business case behind it. Okay, so in terms of framing today's discussion, I'll just run through what I see as the sweet spots, and then hopefully we'll be able to have a bit of interaction either is there a chat, or at least people put their hands up and speak. So in terms of, very much I see this as lying as how can the sector step up and help contributing to that clean power mission target. So some of that is around shared ownership that we've heard earlier. So one thing we can start doing now is there's so many projects already in the large scale development pipeline. So projects larger than 5 megawatts going through that NESO plan, that opening up of potentially mandating shared ownership. We know there are already dozens of developers out there that actually feel it's the right thing to do and are already exploring shared ownership on a voluntary basis. So if there's a big solar or wind project happening in your part of the world, then do kind of reach out to them, float to them the idea that you would be interested in taking on a shared ownership stake There are resources being developed with Community Energy Pathways, the Catapult and GB Energy about guidance and templates of how to do shared ownership agreements. And we will be sharing those throughout our kind of membership network as soon as they're ready. The other pillar, very prominent in there, is that local authority collaboration. So alongside the GB Energy Community Fund, there's the kind of partnership fund that is unlocked when local authorities and community energy organisations collaborate. So it seems like a good idea to start building those bridges with your local councils in anticipation of that funding becoming available during the summer and autumn. And in terms of when we think the funding might become available, yeah, we know a lot of the net zero hubs who administer the current GB Energy Community Fund who kind of reached the end of their current budgets. It's kind of that March, April, new financial year territory. Local elections coming up, so we expect hopefully new funding to appear May onwards. But we do have also the Energy Redress Fund, which is administered by Ofgem, administered by the Energy Saving Trust on behalf of Ofgem, which can provide some of that project development support functionality as well. So yeah, don't feel like you have to sit and wait. There are funding options available. In terms of the sweet spots, technologically, where we think community energy is ready to start building and scaling up, certainly in terms of grid connections, getting that sub 5 megawatt solar space seems to be, there's one of the big, like there's a limit lifted and from 1 megawatt up to 5 megawatts when National Grid needs to be notified. So it's within the powers of the DNOs to grant connections for sub 5 megawatt schemes now. So whether that's rooftop, ground mounts, anything in that area seems like a good option. We've also got lots of potential for onshore wind. I'll go on to this in a bit more in a minute. But onshore wind in particular, there's a big gap still needed in the Clean Power Plan for that. And we think, yeah, we've had a 10-year development hiatus in England. So we started a community wind working group and we're developing, that's having its first meeting tomorrow. And then there's going to be tools to help find viable wind sites as well that we've developed. But other options around that innovation side, smart local energy systems, not a focus necessarily on clean heat, but in terms of it providing flexibility and storage and enabling greater local renewables through smart balancing of loads. We think there's a lot of potential in that. A lot of interesting community battery models, very popular in Australia. So we think, yeah, developing more of these projects would be very beneficial. And again, just a reminder that there is support available already in England through organisations like the Net Zero Hubs, Community Energy Pathways, Community Energy Go, which is our pre-application funding advice support with Centre for Sustainable Energy, and yeah, Repowering in London and others. So yeah, we'll be continually developing resources and training to make the most of this moment. And then, yeah, it's just a reminder of that expression of interest form for GB Energy there as well. Okay, how are we doing for time? Let's see if I can bring up the chat now. Is there anyone who's got a particular kind of question or comment they would like to raise? I can see John Rawlins. Hello.
Is this audio available?
Yeah, I can hear.
So it's just a question on the, and you may not have the answer, but we're finding that sub 5 megawatts, as you mentioned, is great technically, but quite challenging still on the numbers to be able to deliver sufficient scale. Will GB Energy providing significant grant funding towards it, or is the emphasis really on the low cost finance? Because I worry with low cost finance, it still might not work. And we still need some significant grants. Do you have any insights to where the balance of financing is there?
From my reading of the situation, it's more on the business model side in terms of guaranteeing export prices or unlocking local supply models to enable greater energy trading locally to hopefully benefit the business case that side. I don't know about capital funding in particular. It's more about the feasibility and development funds, but maybe there is a procurement angle as well in terms of can GB Energy procure equipment at scale and unlock lower capital costs, well, purchasing costs, and by playing a role there, perhaps that kind of convening role.
Cool. Thank you.
Who else have we got with hands up? Christine Walsh.
Oh, hi. Thanks, John. Can you hear me?
Yep.
It's local. I live in the Northamptonshire area. We are surrounded by warehouses. When we speak to the warehouses about putting solar on the roofs, we are told that they can only use the solar within their own warehouses. The current substations are not capable of taking the energy to digest or to use across the country or even to come into solar.
Yep.
Our area. However, we've also got new solar farms being installed left, right, and centre around us as well.
Yeah.
How do I find out information to understand the truths, how to put pressure on the warehouses so as we can try and work together to actually develop a community energy project?
Yeah, there is an organisation we're working with called the UK Warehousing Association. They're like an equivalent membership body who represents that sector, and they have developed a solar guide and toolkit for their members about how to do rooftop solar projects. There is a little bit of a mention about community energy models in there, but we want to do a lot more with them to unlock those opportunities. So when you're having those local conversations, there it's already on their radar as a possibility. So yeah, we can certainly share that sort of details, and the similar role could be played with supermarkets and others to help. We work with music venues, the Church of England, to kind of raise awareness about community energy as a delivery model in general across different sectors. But no, that's a very important growth area, is that kind of rooftop. I think it's also worth selling that if they're planning on electrifying their fleets or other processes, then having local power on tap will be very helpful there.
I don't see any of them using electric fleets. It's all large diesel lorry.
Yeah, well, hopefully it will become kind of an integrated thing as we kind of get a few good case studies out there. We can certainly share some examples if you stay connected with us. Who else have we got? Yeah, great, thank you. Jacob Hall. You there, Jacob? Well, I've got if Jacob's not there, I've got Alex Hartley with their hand up.
Hi, John.
Hello.
I think Will mentioned about people and that being part, and obviously there's those of us that have been kicking around this for 20 years, but I liked your analogy about the kind of call to arms, World War II. We need a lot more people to hit the ground running with this, and practically, we've got until, what did you say, maybe kind of autumn time to see any of this money coming online. What could sort of existing established groups be doing to support either individuals in kind of neighbouring areas or just generally to help skill up, increase know-how, and see more of a kind of ready army for taking hold of this? Or have you got any sort of thoughts around that? Sorry, it's a really question.
I have been doing a little bit of research about that kind of organisational structure of how it's happened in the past through things like the Home Guard structures and things like that. But yeah, really, we have got some of the ingredients in place, like the regional net zero hubs. Yeah, we've got a good spread of umbrella organisations, but yeah, having that kind of community energy in a box type approach that's mentioned in the GB Energy Plan could be an interesting thing. Is how does a new town or parish council take this on, and what's the right scale in terms of governance to avoid duplication with all the kind. So is it sensible to have like a county level or a regional level kind of umbrella body that does a lot of the admin, and then it frees up the volunteers to do the local engagement, or kind of, yeah, whether that's with businesses or local authorities. But I think just that principle of just getting more information out to just individual homes, and how we Will mention the overlap with the Warm Homes Plan, and that model of we don't either have to do this just as individual homeowners or with big corporate energy projects. There's this space in the middle where we can do things at neighborhood level. So can we coordinate adoption of solar and batteries at a whole street level, like we've seen with the power station film movement? And if we then add in heat pumps, then that's where the flexibility comes in, that the grid needs for this. So I think a few people have mentioned that the expression of interest form doesn't mention heat necessarily, but I think if we speak of it in terms of enabling flexibility and reducing or matching local supply and demand, then it can fit with GB Energy's view in that sense.
All good points. Just I come back to the kind of people side, because even however all singing or dancing community energy in a box is going to be, and templates discussion, you know as well that also that will help, but it's still not as straightforward to do any community energy project with just a set of templates. And getting those, even you talking about the kind of unskilled or newbies to community energy volunteers out there to do the door knocking engagement, there's no provision for getting those people trained up and confident and competent to go out there and do this. And that's just probably something I get a bit upset about, but thank you, that was a great help.
I think we're due to hear a lot more in the next month about what GB Energy proposed in that capability and capacity building side, in terms of we do need to train a lot of people up and raise public awareness about the potential here for sure. So we've got a couple more hands. Sue Riddlestone.
Hello.
Hi there.
I don't know how to turn my video on, but I think you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
I just wanted to ask about who is the local authority, or what's a qualifying local authority, because the parish council in our area is on the case, they'd be super interested, but Bucks County Council not so much. So all of new incentives and this idea of partnerships and so on, can we do that with parish councils, or do we have to go to the county?
That's a good question. That's something I'll probably have to flag back to Fraser, but that we can definitely make note of that. Town and parish council action is going to be very important, I think, in all this. But if you have in terms of the council that's responsible for planning permissions and co-investment and things like that, it's going to be important. We're going to, again, similarly work with the local government association and networks like UK 100 to try and get their members a bit more collaborative as well. But good point. Jacob Hall, are you still there with I saw your video moving again. No. Okay. I can't see anyone's hands up at the moment in the chat.
Oh, sorry. I mean, it's Jacob.
Oh, there we go.
I was thinking I was in it. That's my name, Dan Stone. Dan Stone from the Centre for Sustainable Energy. It was just a question about the kind of whether you knew what the model was going to be for kind of advice and capacity building. It's great. There's lots in there about capacity building, but do we know how that's going to be delivered, who by, and what will the relationship will be from the centre out to sort of existing support structures? It seems really important to get that right.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you on that front. And that's still a to be determined answer, unfortunately. I was hoping we would have a bit more clarity on that for today's event. But it's very important to the work we're both doing. And we hope that whatever they do come out is additional to what is already happening. We know people have been working in this space for 10, 15 years and have that deep expertise to then pass on. And in terms of how these services get procured, it's very important that it makes the best use of that existing skills and experience. There are models already happening in Wales and Scotland, which are very good in terms of the CARES programme and the Welsh Government Energy Service, which are probably feeding into some of the kind of thinking behind what might appear in England. But we'll keep people abreast of how that works forward. But we try and be very cooperative and collaborative on that front. as a network between us.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, John, for hosting this discussion. I think we're all back in the room, and we've got 10 minutes left for the final questions. And we're gonna just go backwards. If we get to hear a question from each room to put to the panel, to Fraser, Will, and Zoe. Let's start with Northern Ireland, then Wales, Scotland, and England. Just, it's not a summary of your breakout room, obviously, but just a theme or question that would be useful to put to GB Energy. And then if you've got any further questions, please do put them in the chat. I'm also going to share my screen in a moment with a QR code for feedback. So if you have some feedback that you can share with us, that'd be much appreciated. You could scan the QR code, and I'm going to post the link into the chat as well in a moment. So over to Jack from Northern Ireland.
That's great, Johannes. Thank you. Fraser, Will, and Zoe, thanks for taking these questions. Hopefully you'll be able to help Northern Ireland with some of these. So how do we look at so you mentioned there about the emergence and development grants for any early stage ideas. I'd like to know how you're sort of planning to work with the Northern Ireland Executive to move beyond those one-off grants. I know that in our context, the focus should really be on building out that infrastructure, that supportive landscape around that. I know with energy policy being devolved in Northern Ireland, you guys will have to be working very, very closely with the executive. And I'd just like to maybe try and unpick that if you can.
Yeah, happy to, Jack. Cheers for the question. So we are in conversation with all the devolved governments and understand completely that where you've got CARES, where you've got Welsh Gov Energy Service, the same doesn't exist currently in Northern Ireland. So as part of those discussions, we're trying to understand, one, what can we get away just now without that infrastructure yet being in place, and two, can we help support the establishment of that infrastructure? The design, what it looks like, who administers it, etc. I think is very much a question for the NI executive. But we're in conversation and on a live, ongoing basis to help support that wherever we can, and to join the dots to the other existing services and providers as far as possible. What we don't want to happen is any major delay for anything getting out to Northern Ireland. So we're also in conversation with a few local authorities and the networks over there as well to tap into as many sort of stakeholder channels as we possibly can.
That's great. And yeah, will we be working with the executive to try and, I know Northern Ireland doesn't have a formal definition in policy for community energy. Is that something maybe that's on your radar?
It's on our radar. This is one of the slopey shoulders moments where I get to say that's for DESNZ to set out and to relay across the rest of the devolved nations as well. In the local power plan, it was outlined that DESNZ would work up their sort of legal definition. I don't have any. I'm not privy to any information on the timelines of that or what's going to come out of it. But we'll be keeping close to it to make sure that as soon as possible we can pick it up as well. And I dare say there will be lots of people on this call engaged in that conversation.
Thank you. Over to Lydia from Wales.
Yeah, hi everyone. The biggest two reflections that came up from our session were around how GB Energy are going to measure value, particularly how they're going to categorise underserved communities, and then how to assess sort of the impact in those communities. We know more middle class affluent communities, you input maybe £100,000, you're going to get a set output, whereas some of our more economically disadvantaged communities, it might not be around, having a project ready to go. It might be on the softer approach. So how we assess, what is an underserved community, but then what does impact and what does outcome look like in different communities. There was some concern over some questions around what does delivery look like in a devolved context, but also how is that funding allocated with regard to existing organisations in Wales. But the one question Lee had was around the expression of interest so that we can go to our members and explain, you know, why they should apply. I think Lee just had a question around, is there much detail of what is required from member groups to fill in this form? Is it quite simple? And then where does that lead? Where does that information go? And what might happen as a consequence of them filling that in? Once we know that, then we can reach out to our members and encourage them to sign up.
I'll take them back to front, Lydia, if that's okay, because the last one is the one that that's my particular favourite of anything. Yeah. So on the EOI, depends what stage that your project's at. I would say we want all projects to go in there. If you have a viable project just now, or you know, the seeds of a project, please do stick it in. If you have a project that, say, you've done a bit of feasibility on, you think you know what it looks like and how it stacks up, what the revenues are, etc., then there's a further section where you can detail all of that and send it in. So in terms of how long it's going to take you to do it and how simple it is to do it, if you have a project where you think you have the detail, the feasibility has been done, etc., then it's going to take longer, but in an ideal world, you have that to hand. But I would say don't let that preclude you from sending in. We want to see everything, and that serves two purposes, right? The first is, can we prioritise ahead of whatever funds and approaches being launched through the summer or besides? Can we still work to get some support out the door? But also, as we're shaping out our future strategic thinking on things that we might pivot to or things we might support in the future, it's useful for us to know what demand exists and what pipeline exists out in the world that we can potentially go out and try and unlock. So it serves those two purposes. The first naturally being more relevant to your project, but the second being relevant to all projects going forward, so we can get the right support in place. The second question, devolved governments. As we said, we're in conversation with all devolved governments just now. We did funnel a bit of money at the end of last year through beginning of last year, God, ages ago now, this time last year, in fact, through CARES and Welsh Gov Energy Service. We're trying to figure out what the more sustainable model for that is going forward. We're not going to duplicate what CARES and Welsh Government Energy Service already does, but we're in conversation or likewise the Launchpad with Community Energy Scotland and DTAS and the other Ine Cumbre and all these organisations that are already in play. We're very much about sort of partnership in that sense, and can we support you to do the work that you need to do? I can't give much detail in terms of how money is being apportioned just now, but we are figuring all of that out in detail and all of that, which will come with the announcement around the grants and capability support in the first instance, and then the future capital stuff we anticipate being UK wide. We're not planning to, because that will be something that comes directly from GD in that sense. That's current thinking, at least, subject to change. The last question, just transition, this is my favourite one. I've been writing about this and doing this for years and years. So I was glad to get in and get a bit of license to bear it into the work that we're doing at GB Local. In terms of the definitions, some of the last work that I did, I think my ex-colleague Grace might still be on the call. Some of the last work that we did at Regen was to work with local authorities in the first instance to map out capacity across local authority areas. And the way that we did that was we ran an interesting bit of machine learning, and we also did a bit of engagement to identify social and economic indicators for different areas, predominantly through the indices of multiple deprivation to outline deprivation in the first instance. We then layered that with climate risk, which was a core part of the work that we were doing, to understand which areas are particularly deprived per this indicator, again, a horrible term, but which areas are particularly deprived at risk of climate impacts, and what organisations exist on the ground to support those communities. What's the size of those organisations? What is their remit? What do they do? And with that, we managed to develop a bit of a composite measure to help target out support for, in this case, it was climate resilience. But that principle we can apply to identifying those types of communities who currently don't have a local or community energy project, but maybe have some relevant organisations, existing social infrastructure that can be tapped into. And if not, but there is some demand amongst citizens there, which that next step of the kind of, let's say, co-creation approach or co-design approach is one that we're still working out because we're a small team just now, but we will be growing. Can we get out through the capacity and capability network? Can we stimulate that interest to then turn that into capability support and then ideally turn that into projects? So we won't measure success in those cases by do you have solar panels generated and serving a local community? That's great if you can get to that, but we appreciate that's a slower burn, and we're not deprioritizing that by any means. It's very much in an ideal world, we get out, we build the capacity, and then in 5 years' time or 7 years' time, however long that capacity building takes, that community is then ready to come in on the second wave of GB local funding and resource and support and so on and so forth. So we have some ideas about that already, and we'll hope to publish more about that in a proper strategy alongside everything over the summer.
That's great. Yeah.
Thank you. Quick question from Scotland, Zoe and John, if you could just follow up straight away, and then perhaps Fraser, you could use those 2 questions to have your final comments, and then we'll wrap up the call. We'll gather questions that you weren't able to ask in the chat, so please put them down, and we'll share that with GB Energy and try to get some answers. So yeah, Zoe, over to you.
Erin's actually going to go for.
Sorry, obviously we had the privilege of having Fraser join us in the Scotland room, so a lot of our questions did get answered very quickly, but perhaps you could share a bit more about the initiatives GBE is undertaking to improve the financing options by de-risking and potentially underwriting some of these projects.
Yeah, happy to, with big caveat that it's all under development and subject to change. But we know that a big part of the challenge, particularly around shared ownership, not exclusively, but it tends to be more so in shared ownership, is the confidence from commercial lenders, from banks and institutional investors to come in and support communities to buy out their stakes in commercial projects. And we know that there's a massive pipeline of commercial projects that communities should by rights be able to buy into. So to get around that, we're exploring a few options. One of those is with GBE involvement, whether legally or otherwise. Does that then give the confidence to the sector to come in and bring money in if we're supporting a community through their chunk of buying out or buying into a shared ownership project? The other side of this is that a lot of communities might be interested in buying into commercial development, but not yet have the capacity, the capability, the expertise, in which case can GBE effectively act as a sort of steward of that community stake to safeguard it until such a time that communities are ready and do have the capacity. On the back end, we're thinking here about getting a sort of recycling money as much and as quickly as possible, without just sending it out to the private sector so that they can harvest the interest of it. But we're looking to recycle, because we're not just thinking about we've got £1 billion or up to £1 billion and 1,000 projects to do. We're thinking, how do we recycle and grow that for the next 1,000, the next 1,000, the next 1,000? In terms of security to lenders to come in and support communities to buy out their shares or to build their projects, that gives us a fairly unique position in potentially having a really big, 1,000 project portfolio essentially, that we can work with to sort of aggregate, bundle up to get that money recycled. All of this subject to much more detailed thinking, but we're exploring that unique position of GBE and the kind of, I guess, the license we have to operate and how we maximise that both legally, commercially, but moreover for social value and community ownership.
We are running over a few minutes. I trust you will just drop off if you have to go. We will finish with this question. So thanks for staying on, John.
Okay, yes. So a lot of interest in what the capacity building service might look like and the role you'll play in procuring equipment to help bring costs down. But main question is, how would GB Energy enable partnerships where the other party isn't interested or doesn't have the capacity to engage, for example, warehouses or for a county council, perhaps?
That's an interesting question. That's a really interesting question. Those 2 questions are kind of 2 sides of the response to this. Is in that situation. So one, I guess, proactively as part of our engagement strategy, which again is I've been here for 2 months, give me a break, it's under development. But the engagement strategy very much splits out by those different sectors. So what we want to understand in terms of our current analysis and our engagement work is what sectors have potential sites that would make sense for community ownership, and can we build relationships in those sectors to help them understand what the value of community ownership on their sites or on their buildings or whatever it might be is, and to try and improve awareness and understanding and appetite for community ownership going forward. And we know that a lot of, if we say more commercial or corporate organisations, ESG is something that always makes me cringe a little bit, but it's something that can be tapped into on that basis. So we're identifying these different types of organisations that we can tap into, and again, sort of awareness raise, and that will be in partnership with capacity and capability support. The other side of that is then if there is an opportunity that seems to exist, but a community is not currently ready, at that point, it's a more structured funnel into the capacity and capability support, ideally directly one-to-one support with those projects to help guide them through that process. Does that answer your question, John? I feel like I've missed a bit of it.
I think that's fine for the time we have, so thank you.
Great.
Okay, then thank you everyone for dedicating your lunch break to this. Thank you, Fraser, Zoe, and Will for the panel contributions and the questions and answers, everyone who's been hosting the sessions. Before you leave the call, please click on the feedback link, and we hope to see you at a future Energy Learning Network event. Goodbye, everyone.